Welcome to another edition of A Safer Macomb. I am Sheriff Tony Wickersham, and on our show, we will talk about matters of public safety and awareness for our communities. We will also highlight the men and women of the Macomb County Sheriff's Office. Today's segment, we will be talking about a great program called FAN, Families Against Narcotics. My guests today are the Honorable Linda Davis, 41B District Court Judge in Clinton Township, and parent and very involved in FAN, Mark Rudolph. Thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. One message I want to get out before we start the questioning is that parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody that cares or has a child that's either in middle school, high school, or in college, you're going to want to watch this segment. There is a lot of information that we're going to talk about is identifying the face of addiction and narcotics use here in Macomb County and even in the state of Michigan. As a law enforcement representative for over 25 years, I can tell you personally that the face of addiction has changed. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, an addict, if you would picture that person in your mind, was somebody that was living on the street, a thief, a prostitute, that would use drugs as a means of escaping whatever their problems were. Now that face has changed. It's our honor roll students, it's our star athletes, it's your neighbor, it's your co-worker. It is really changed, and that's what FAN is all about. So if we can get going, Mark, can you tell us a little something about FAN, how it got going, and what it's about?
Sure. I lost my son about 3.5 years ago, October 20th of '07. There was another young man, Kyle Campbell, that had died on the 1st. And those were the kind of the proverbial straws that broke the camel's back. Following their deaths, the superintendent of schools and the chief of police, Rick Rapicki and George Rohe, organized a community meeting. There was about 80 people showed up, most of us pretty mad at everybody and everything. Myself, I mean, I had just lost my son. Of course, I was mad at the schools, the law enforcement, the courts, me, Ryan, his mom, you name it, I was mad. But a thing that occurred during that meeting was there was a group of young people that were in recovery who stood up and said, give us a chance to talk to your kids. We were taught all of the same things through DARE and through, you know, what parents say and what police officers say. You know, it's a bad idea to do drugs, and this is the reasons why. But we weren't listening to you, and these kids aren't listening to you either. But maybe they'll listen to us. Within a month, we were in the Fraser High School. We take over health class for the day, and we have young people in recovery share their experience of what they thought was fun at one point turn into the nightmare of addiction and all of the things of stealing, manipulating, lying, prostituting, that kind of follows that addiction.
And again, did you see it coming as a parent?
No, not really. I mean, as a parent, I had told Ryan a number of times, drugs is my number one worry. I tried to look for the signs, you know, the eyes, the smell, smell his breath and all those kinds of things. But I always found a reason to explain it. He's got new friends. Well, of course he's got new friends. He's working, he's in high school, he's on the swim team. I mean, there's a number of reasons why he kind of made excuses for that. He's tired. Same thing. He's working, he's in 2-a-day practices for school. So there were reasons why, or ways I was able to kind of explain them away. And again, by the time I really knew where Ryan was at, he was already in addiction.
And Judge Davis, now your involvement in FAN, again, I know there's a personal aspect to it, but you also, as a district court judge, you're seeing these kids coming in into your courtroom.
Right.
Can you tell us your involvement?
Yeah, I was a prosecutor for 13 years before I became a judge, and I was the head of the drug unit for a number of those years. And during that period of time, I only saw one heroin case. On a regular basis, I get as many as 4 and 5 young people a day that are in my courtroom for theft crimes that when you investigate a little bit, you find out they are really heroin-related crimes. I started tracking that and found that within a 60-day period of time, I had 92 young people that came through my courtroom. Those are epidemic proportions. And if you want to weigh that on how serious that is, I've been kind of looking at the statistics of this. Last year in Macomb County, we had 156 young people that died of overdoses. In Fenton, just 2 weeks ago, they had 3 children that died, 17 and 18 years old, a couple of days apart of overdoses. In Lapeer, they had 14 kids that died. We have gone overboard talking about H1N1 because 3 people died of that, and yet these young people are dying and no one is talking about it. And part of that is because of the stigma of it, is that parents don't want to come forward and say, I have a child that's got an addiction. It's something that they feel they should be ashamed of. And what people need to understand is addiction is a disease. It's no different than cancer or diabetes. And people will say, well, yeah, but with cancer, you don't make a choice to get cancer. You don't make a choice to get diabetes. But yet if somebody is smoking, they really are taking a pretty big chance that they're going to get cancer in the future. We don't deny them treatment, and we treat these kids very differently. So we really need to change the way we look at addiction and who is being addicted. Like Mark indicated, we have a young boy that talks for us that was a world-class soccer player that got addicted to Vicodin through his doctor's prescriptions and ended up in full-blown addiction. Another kid that signed with the Red Wings. These kids are good kids with great grades, great futures. They do what they think is going to be innocent and fun and end up in full-blown addiction that ends up oftentimes, unfortunately, taking their life.
Right, and again, I think to some of the viewers out there, when they think about drug use or they think about addiction, you know, they think it's in the urban areas, it's in the downtown, it's in those big cities, and that's where the drugs are at. Those 3 communities that you just mentioned, those communities there are rural communities, small communities, usually tight-knit communities, and they're having an epidemic of deaths due to drug overdose, and that is just, you know, I think it's a problem for us, it's a problem for law enforcement, and again, we need to get on out and reach our young people and tell them the dangers of drugs. And again, we have the DARE program, and it's great to hit those elementary school kids, but I think we still need to hammer home that message as they keep getting older. And again, you know, I personally attended the fan meeting and heard the stories of the parents and some of the recovering addicts. And as a law enforcement officer, you know, it has really changed, you know, my thinking about what we're doing as it pertains to drug enforcement. Again, 10, 15 years ago, I've said it before, we tried to arrest our way out of the problem. And if you had drugs, you know, we're just going to arrest you, we're going to put you in jail, you're going to serve your time, and you're going to get out, and what are you doing? You're just going to go right back to the drugs. So, you know, I think this is a different approach, and FAN's doing a great job. Some of your messages that the FAN wants to get out as far as, you know, what are the goals?
One of them is it's everywhere. It can happen to anybody in any family. As Linda indicated, I mean, we're talking about kids whose drug addiction started with legal, managed, medically managed use. And we have kids, Ryan never was prescribed these drugs. He got them elsewhere. We never had them in our house, but they're out there available very easily. So that certainly is one thing, is it can happen to anybody, you know, any family in any community. And in terms of community, the Operation Smackdown, really, you can talk more about it, but I mean, it indicates that it was 276 over two different Smackdowns, but they were from 20-some different cities. I mean, these kids are coming from everywhere, and if they're not going to Flint to get it, they're going to Detroit to get it. Again, it's everywhere. So that's certainly one of the messages, is that we kind of realize that, you know what, you could have an addict living in your house.
Right. And with that Operation Smackdown, that was a group of law enforcement agencies that came together for a collaborative effort, Macomb County, City of Detroit, and we targeted some of the known heroin houses and where our youths were going to get their drugs. And what we found is that, I mean, it's not just, they came from all over. They came from St. Clair County, they came from Sanilac County, Lapeer County, Macomb County, and they were actually getting on buses and going into the city of Detroit to get their drugs and coming back out here. So, you know, we plan on doing more of those and publicize them and let people know that, you know, we're not going to tolerate it in our communities and do our best to curtail it. You mentioned, you know, the stigma, and I think, you know, meaning families, it's basically getting the parents to try and understand or realize that maybe their child does have a problem. Yeah. And I think that's something that FAN does. It wants to bring the families in and then give them as much information as possible, if you can speak on that.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems we have, we do drug awareness nights. We did one at Kensington Church last night, and we publicize these. We've really been fortunate that Channel 7, WJR have picked up on us and are announcing our things, but most parents sit back and they think, well, I don't need to go to that because that could never be my child. Yeah, that was Mark, that was Susan that speaks at our, we have over 300 families that are involved right now in FAN, and every one of those families thought it could never be them. These are great families with good kids, and they all talk to their children about not using drugs, and their kids were good students and involved in sports. And you're really being naive if you think that because you've talked to your kids and you have raised them right, that you can't end up with this problem. When we go into the schools and talk and we ask the kids, how many of you either are using or know somebody that's using opiates? Over 80% of 10th graders are raising their hands.
That's incredible.
So
that's alarming.
Parents need to educate themselves. Education is knowledge and it's power. And parents need to bring their kids to these programs so that they also hear from other kids their age what happens when you cross over those lines. It's a really compelling story, and you won't walk out of there not feeling like you've learned something very, very valuable. What we think is innocent children behavior sometimes can be the sign that something is going on. You know, teenagers act goofy.
Right.
And so we oftentimes write off their behavior as being something that's just normal and they're going to outgrow it. You don't outgrow addiction, and parents can't love their children through it. You need help. And so arming yourself with the tools you need is really important.
Right, and I think that's one of the strong suits of FAN is again, bringing in the families, bringing in the parents and the loved ones, and embracing them and saying, you know, it's okay, let's get together and we can help you, you know, either identify it or solve your problem. And you have that support group, and that you're, you know, you're not alone. Right. Again, you know, you don't want to be that parent that says, you know, not my kid. And again, we see that in law enforcement, and I'm sure sometimes you'll see it, you know, that, you know, I have a good kid, and we want all of our kids are good, but at some point, the direction that they go may have been the wrong direction, and it's time to get them back onto the right road.
Right. And back in April, Channel 4, we worked with Channel 4 for a while on, they aired a series of pieces throughout the day, and in the evening some of us went down, some of the FAN members, and we had some clinician people, some professionals with us, and we answered phones for an hour and a half, I think, and we had 120 phone calls from all over. And I mean, so people they're looking for help, they don't understand, and as a parent, I don't know where to go. I mean, once I realized that Ryan was opiate dependent, that he had a real drug issue. I shouldn't even say opiate at that point. I knew he had a drug issue. I didn't know where to go. So. Well,
that's what we'll talk about on our second segment. Right now we're gonna take a break and we'll be back.
I could tell the car was gonna flip. I remember flipping the first time. Then I remember landing. I knew I had survived, but I also knew I was hurt. It was still hard to believe that I was actually in that car and that I survived. I know wearing my seatbelt saved my life. You just never know what's going to happen.
Welcome back to A Safer Macomb. I'm Sheriff Tony Wickersham, and my guests today are the Honorable Linda Davis, Judge of the 41B District Court in Clinton Township, and Mark Rudolph. Both individuals here are involved with Families Against Narcotics, FAN, and it's an organization that brings in family members, parents, those in the community, and helping deal with drug addiction. How do people find out more information or get a hold of or become involved in FAN?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, we have both a website that was actually developed by Mark and students from Fraser High School, and that's familiesagainstnarcotics.org. You just type out the full name .org, and all of our events are listed on there, our drug awareness nights, personal stories, parents talking about it. There's just really an abundance of information about addiction in general. There's also, we are on Facebook, and so you can go on and just type in Families Against Narcotics, and that will come up as well. And Mark also has a personal website that is called promise2ryan2.com.
Promise to Ryan, the number 2.
Right.
.com.
.com. And all of those sites give information about our organization and information that's crucial for parents that think they may be facing a problem.
Right. And your meetings are held?
Every third Tuesday of the month at United
Methodist.
United Methodist Church in Fraser on Garfield Road, right across the street from the high school.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the seriousness of addiction and how do, you know, our young adults, our young people, our high school and middle school students, how do they become addicted? Again, one of the things we always use, at least in law enforcement, when we talk about as far as addiction, is gateway drugs. Can we talk a little bit about gateway drugs? What's leading them into those more harder addictive type drugs?
It is exactly as we've always called the gateway drugs: alcohol, marijuana. I mean, some parents still think it's okay to serve alcohol as long as it's in their house. Incredibly, some think sitting down and smoking marijuana with their kids is okay.
They'd rather be their friend than their parent. And
Yeah,
that there is a
absolutely,
mistake.
absolutely.
Yes.
But almost all of the recovering people that you talk to will tell you that this started out as fun. Having a beer, smoking a joint, you know, they think they're having fun. And at some point, they're looking for a little more fun. And somebody that they're with has got a pill or got something else, so they start there. And when we really talk about you know, people that become addicts, there's a line that they cross when they start taking that pill that kind of allows them to cross other boundaries that they said they would never cross. And many times in our medicine cabinets are prescription medications that are addictive. The opiates, painkillers, Percocet, Percodan, Darvocet, Vicodin, that's absolutely the most popular, and Oxycontin are all man-made heroin. And these kids are playing around with Vicodin, doing one pill once in a while. Now it's one pill on a regular basis, 2 pills, and before they know it, they're opiate dependent. And it kind of escalates from there. Heroin really enters the scene only because of expense. They're still never going to inject it. Again, another boundary that they won't cross, but they go to heroin because they can get that for $10 a pack, but an Oxycontin tablet could be $80. So it's a financial decision to go to heroin, and many of them, I mean, in a fairly short period of time, end up injecting the heroin, and man, you're now, I mean, you've already been in big trouble, but you know, now your world has really changed.
Correct, and again, well, that's where, you know, we see in law enforcement and at the court, the judge sees it all the time, is that, you know, it's the prescription drugs that our youth are getting into. They're easy, accessible. They're in the medicine cabinet. They may have been there for 6 months, and we'll talk about the doctors after this. But you know, if you take them for 4 or 5 days and you have a 30-day supply, it's sitting up there, and the kids now are taking them, and whether they're bringing them to school or they're selling them. And we mentioned that a pill could go as much as $80.
Yeah.
And once they start taking those opiates, then they're hooked.
Yeah.
Right.
And Your Honor, I'm sure you see it that, you know, they can't afford that $80 anymore, so they revert to stealing and stealing.
Almost every theft crime, Sheriff, is generated by an opiate addiction. It's just amazing to me. And it's always amazing to me as well as parents will be sitting there. They have no idea what's going on here. They just think he made a stupid decision. They decided to lift something out of a store and they got caught with it. But what they don't understand is it's indicative of a bigger problem. And these kids will volunteer the information. I'll say, boy, you know, a theft crime, you've never been in trouble in your life, what's going on here? Their head will drop, and I'll say, you have an opiate addiction, don't you? And they'll look at me, and I'll say, just be honest about it, I want to help. And they'll open up and start telling me, yeah, I'm addicted to heroin, and the parents are in the back just absolutely flabbergasted. They break down, they start crying, they have no clue that this is going on. And that's the thing about addiction to these pills and heroin is for a period of time, your kids look perfectly normal. You know, they can function, they keep doing well in school, they actually have some energy in the very beginning of it that you think they're doing just great. You know, it's as time wears on and the addiction gets more and more and more, that's when you start seeing their hygiene changing, a loss of weight. But in the beginning, for the first several months that they're addicted to this, there are not a lot of physical changes you can tell.
Right, they're still going to work, they're still in the swim team, they're still getting good grades in school. But once you start seeing the hygiene kind of changes, the lack of enthusiasm for things that they used to love, you're in trouble. I mean, and that usually, and unfortunately for parents, is really the first sign. Because like Linda said, up till then, things look great.
All right, and you know, we'll talk about the fact that, you know, if they go from the prescription drugs or the marijuana and they move and they can't afford it anymore, then they're going to the heroin. Right. And they're going to the heroin because it is cheaper drug.
And easier to get.
Easier to get, and again, and that becomes the addiction, and then that could ultimately lead to death.
Right.
And that was, you know, that's what we're trying to prevent by this group here.
Right.
So, when we talk about prescription drugs, we talk about doctors prescribing, you know, the Vicodin for even sports injuries or other type of injuries. What would one of you have to say about that?
Well, that's my passion, I think, is doctors, number one, I don't think any doctor intentionally tries to create an issue where a child has an addiction. It's more of a time-saving device. You go in, you get a minor surgery, and they know you're going to be in pain for a few days, and rather than you calling every couple of days saying, I'm still in pain, they'll write a prescription for 30 or 60 Vicodin. And you end up taking 4 of them. That gets you over the hump of the bad pain, and most people will just take those 4 if you're not an addict, and then the rest of it goes on the shelf. A good analogy of that, and I know the Sheriff's Department has this as well, but I don't know the poundage that you collected, right. But in 1 week, Fraser collected 100 pounds of unused pills. And what that tells me is doctors are overprescribing. Those pills weren't necessary, or people would have used them, and what they ended up is, what those pills are doing is they're ending up in the hands of our teenagers because they're so available. And the word is out that you can feel pretty good taking these things. That's what they're designed to do. What parents need to know is, number one, challenge your doctor. If you go, your child legitimately has an injury, number one, or you, and you go to the doctor, don't be afraid to tell them you want a non-narcotic pain medicine. There are some incredibly good pain relievers that are non-narcotic that you can take instead of Vicodin or oxycodone. We call those heroin light because they are heroin derivatives. I mean, they do the same thing that heroin does. They affect your brain the same way. So don't be afraid to tell them that you don't want to take a narcotic. I can tell you my mother was in an accident, and she's 85 years old last year. And this is kind of the attitude that's going on. That's one of the largest growing populations of addicts, by the way, are elderly people. And she had some very serious injuries, and she needed something very strong in the beginning. She had a lot of broken bones, and she was in pretty bad shape. But when she got better, she told the doctors, I don't want any opiates, because she hears me talk all the time. She didn't want to become addicted. And one of the doctors actually said to her, who cares if you're an addict, you're 85 years old. That attitude has to change. It has to change. And the same thing is happening with our kids where they're being prescribed pills. We have a story of an 11-year-old boy that hurt his ankle and was prescribed oxycodone, one of the strongest pain medications you can get, as a first alternative. So ask for a non-narcotic. If a non-narcotic isn't doing it, ask for a non-opiate. And then if that's not giving you release, ask for a reasonable prescription for it. And doctors need to be aware to not overwrite these prescriptions. Drug companies are making $354 billion a year on selling narcotics that end up in the hands of our
Right,
kids.
and that's the push, and I guess that's where, you know, if you're saying is talk to your doctor. And again,
Absolutely.
whether,
Right.
you know, the prescription's for 30 days or try 15 days or 10 days.
Right.
And then maybe if you have to go back, or if after 5 days, you know, you're feeling better and you don't need them, you know.
Right.
We talk about disposal, and
Yeah.
at the
Right.
Sheriff's Department, we collect narcotics Monday through Friday. We have basically a mailbox in our building here where at any time you can come on in, drop them off, we will take them and properly dispose of, just because we don't want them in the house, we don't want them in the hands of our kids, and we'll dispose, we don't want them in our water system, so we'll properly dispose of them.
Yeah, there's a number of communities that Fraser has
Sure,
one
yeah.
of those as well. And
Most
a
of the
number
communities
Yep.
are really getting in there.
It's a great idea.
Okay. You have some events coming up.
Right.
Why don't you talk about the events so we can get that out to our viewers?
Well, we do an annual run. We're a 501(c) organization, so none of us get paid for anything we do for this organization. We all volunteer our time, but we do things like print material, get information out. We have travel expenses if we're traveling someplace outside our local area here. So we do one annual fundraiser right now, and it's a 5K, 10K walk run. You can either walk it or run it. We do that every July, and it's coming up. And it's a really good way to get involved. And if you're in recovery, we have a sponsor that is paying for all of the recovery kids to walk as a group. These kids are really phenomenal. They speak for us all the time, and they always say, there's an old saying that says, what doesn't kill you makes you a stronger person. And when you meet these young recovering addicts, that really is true. Kids that go through recovery understand pain like most of us don't understand. They understand loss like most of us don't understand. And they become incredibly good spiritual human beings. And so we are honoring those kids that are in recovery by letting them walk for free this year and having somebody sponsor them. And we're hoping to have 100 of those kids out walking with us this year.
And a couple other things related to that is we also we're looking for sponsors to support the run. This is our big fundraiser for the year. And you know, Linda has said in the past that one of the things growing up, and even as a parent, that we never thought would ever happen. First of all, drugs in my life, drugs with my son, but that I would actually call heroin addicts my friend. I'm telling you, some of these kids are like my surrogate kids. I mean, I love them. To watch them turn into the responsible adults that they have become is fabulous. And again, I love them like they're my surrogate kids. They're great.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, we're running out of time, and I think that event is July 16th.
Correct.
And it's at Fraser High School.
Yes.
Go to the website, go to Facebook, find out more about FAN and get involved. I know I'll be running. I haven't decided yet whether it's the 5K or the 10K, probably the 5. But I really thank you for being on our show. There was a wealth of information, and again, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
thank you as well, Tony.
Well, that concludes today's show, and we'll see you on the next segment of A Safer Macomb.